and welcome back to the afternoon session. I must say, a couple of years ago, I was like, yeah, okay, this cold day. And then it started to grow on me. And I must say, we're at that point where we are packing so much into this day that I am sure if we want to expand on some of the conversations, like the just energy transition, we'll just have to add another day. I mean, so that's how this has sort of grown. And partly, of course, because of the significant role of coal in our country, but also in the region. So I think it's such a good day so far, and I'm really, really looking forward to continue the rest of the afternoon. We try and keep things sort of real. So we obviously, I mean, this morning we had a panel of 4 CEOs and the CEO of the Minerals Council. And I mean, perhaps we can call them the big elephants, I don't know, or the gorillas. I personally am always quite aware that in our country, we are missing a junior sector. You know, we don't have as vibrant a sector as we should have, if you look at our natural endowment. And that's why we always make sure we also have a panel of smaller producers. And please, this is not offending you. I mean, I think it's actually good to be a small, nimble junior operator who can see gaps and take gaps that sometimes the big guys just can't take. So this is what this afternoon's first panel is going to be talking about, is how would smaller coal producers react to the changing market sort of conditions. Sandra du Toit is the Africa leader for mergers and acquisition at EY. She's a friend of the Joburg Indaba. And we have her back because she's so damn competent and capable that I don't even have to brief her. She just takes it over, shuts me up, and get it done. She even gave me the question, the poll question. So can we have the poll question up to wake everybody up? Sandra and panel, we are averaging about 110, 120 participants, which is stunning. I mean, it's really, the coal industry is in conversation, and that's what this is meant to be. I want to put to the audience a question that Sandra put forward, and we can leave it on for quite a bit and come back to it at the end. So when I come back with Q&A, we'll see where the audience is. So you don't know where the audience is before the time. And the question is a simple one. When will South Africa finally stop using coal to generate power? Option 1. Within the next 10 years. In other words, in our lifetimes. I mean, you all youngsters, but I mean, you know, it's even in my lifetime, within 10 years. Option 2, somewhere between 10 and 20 years. Option 3 is 20 to 30 years. Option 4 is 30 years plus. And if we look at our various published plans and so on, then that sounds like coal is still around at that time. And then obviously, for completeness sake, option 5 is never. So please click on the correct screen. It's the same window where you're going to put your questions to this panel. Get your questions in quickly. But for the moment, just first participate in the poll. So when will South Africa finally stop? 1. Second option is 10 to 20 years. Third option, 20 to 30 years. Fourth option, 30 years plus. And then really for the believers or the very young people, never. Thank you for joining us. And over to you. Thanks.
Bernard, thank you. Thank you very much. And again, I'm going to give the credit to Shammy for having kind of prompted that poll question, because when he and I were doing the prep, we had a little bit of a gossip about this. But we're going to kick off the conversation today, Bernard, with the kind of core question, I think, for this panel discussion, which really goes to how the Zandile, I want to get this right, the emerging coal producers, Bernard, as opposed to the junior coal producers, experience the impact of COVID. And Zandile is, of course, with Black Royalty Minerals, operating Koornfontein. So Zandile, how bad was it? And what was the impact that your business saw in those early days of COVID?
Yeah, thank you, Sandra, and thank you to the organizing team for having me. I think our industry, like many other economies in the world, hasn't been spared from being affected greatly by this pandemic. And of course, South Africa's economy was already on its knees even before COVID hit us. We saw a couple of downgrades last year, and already our economy was not doing so great. So when we saw the decline both locally and internationally in the demand of coal, in fact, when I read the International Energy Agency Coal 2020 report, I quote, they say the coal demand has seen its biggest drop since World War II, unquote. So a notable impact was the decline in international demand that led to an oversupply of coal in the international markets. With the lower demand in 2020, coal prices recorded a third-year successive decline, and the prices were averaging around $65 per ton. Due to the pricing pressure, the value of the total SA sales decreased by 6% to about 132 billion rands. And this is according to the statistics published by Minerals Council South Africa. Input costs for SA producers increased by 6.9% last year, and the production declined by 2.4%. And of course, as expected, people directly employed in the coal mining also decreased by 3.9%. What we also saw locally, Eskom declared a force majeure beginning of the hard lockdown last year. And this was as a result of electricity demand that reduced by 5.1% in 2020 when compared to 2019. With all that said, fixed production cost remained the same if it didn't increase at all, and no price in guessing how severely the emerging miners were impacted by this. In fact, some of our emerging miners were even at the brink of shutting down, and Shammy will attest to that. But as we've heard earlier in the sessions in the morning, that the recent developments and looking ahead shows that there's an increase in the international demand and the corresponding prices have increased. And I think in my view, two things have led to that. One, the China placing a ban on Australian coal markets. The thermal coal prices recorded significant increases. And secondly, the strong Asian demand. So I really strongly believe that as emerging miners, we need to be more conscious and playing more meaningfully in increasing our export and taking advantage of the prices as they are. And beginning of the sessions, we heard that we are looking at these prices as they are in the $90 per ton being with us, or at least remaining in the next 5 years or so. So I really think that we should, as coal producers and more specifically, and as emerging miners, this is the industry that we need to export. This is the industry that we need to exploit more.
Okay, Zandile, thank you very much. And we're going to come back a little bit later in the session to talking about what the things are that as emerging coal producers we can be doing. But I want to take your invitation to Shammy. And Shammy, this impact that Zandile has described, it forced you to rethink your capital allocation, and it forced you to dip into your pockets. So for you, what was the opportunity cost? What did it take from you to keep going? And what do you think the impact is going to be of that into your business in the near future?
Thank you very much, Sandra. I will try to be as brief as I can be about this, and I'll try and do it without being emotional, because I think the cost of it has been very severe. What have we given up is basically, we have given up the near-term future to basically make sure that we survive now. And what I mean by that is that we had to go look, you are producing at suboptimal capacity, as Sandile has mentioned. You are forced to cover the costs of a mine that is supposed to either produce 100,000 tons a month, but you are only producing 50,000. I mean, it's almost a catch-22. You don't want to go and let go of employees when you believe that is a temporary measure. So you do your best to try and keep them, and hopefully, the market basically turns as it has. So there was a real cost of production that hit all of us. And I think it basically starved us of opportunity where we could be able to have cemented our space within the industry and even market share-wise, both locally and internationally. And I think the third thing was that we have had to go into debt to sustain operations, and I don't have to let anybody know. You want to do that when you're busy spending capital to grow. So most of us, and I think to answer your question, actually, and legacy-wise, is such that we now have to go through a period where we need to repay that debt without having to invest on the future, if any. And I think the whole uncertainty of it all going forward is such that the legacy of it is such that my belief is you will see lack of investment in coal mining in the near future, up until those who are good enough have recovered fully to be able to start putting money into any future projects. So that is, I suppose, the legacy of it. And I think if you top that with the whole uncertainty around how we're gonna go green and all of that, we now have to think very carefully. I mean, I think Morné will attest to it as well, and almost anybody. Are we brave enough to think that there's a project with R1 billion that you want to go and do? So it has hurt us in a manner that we will think a whole lot harder to go into new projects or to even invest. You probably might just want to look at what you do internally and maximize production out of it.
So, Shammy, all of those facilities that you had lined up to expand your business, you've now had to sort of pour into keeping the business going. We
cut back a lot. Yeah.
Morné, you were caught in a tricky spot when lockdown hit, right? But you actually had a very different experience in terms of support network to what Shammy and Zandile has explained to us. Because you, with Minergy, have the good fortune of being in Botswana and sort of having a different government infrastructure around that. And I think it will be really interesting to the audience. So if you can maybe share with us your experience of where you guys were when lockdown hit and what that meant for you.
Hi, thank you, Sandra, and afternoon to everybody. Thank you for the opportunity. Shammy doesn't want to get emotional. Maybe I will. I think COVID is the effect on the coal industry, and especially on emerging or junior miners, is underestimated, because a junior miner is not as protected as the big players. The knocks that we take is significantly bigger. So let me say up front that we didn't escape any of COVID. All the challenges that was faced by our competitors and so forth, we also experienced. We were approaching COVID relief packages, financial institutions, because we in coal mining, it doesn't matter if it's COVID, they still applied commercial hurdles. So I found that very strange during times like this. So those type of avenues were closed down. We tried to raise additional equity as a listed entity. You can imagine that COVID forced people to put their money in their pocket, sit on it, and decide to go forward with it. So all the traditional avenues were closed. So we were fortunate that in Botswana, we approached government. And in terms of their legislation, they do have the ability to buy into your mining operations at a very, let's say, market-related type of mechanism. It's not a take for free or free load or something like that. So that's where the process has started. So we were always in engagement with them because they were always interested in taking up some kind of stake in the business. So that was the initial. And from there, because our doors were closed in our faces through the traditional avenues, we, as Shammy had to do, had to resort to debt. Normal debt was not available. If you walk into a bank, And even if you wear a suit, and I've only got one as a coal miner, they don't allow you in because, you coal, and never mind coal, you're a startup business, so significantly different. So we are very grateful to the Botswana government for recognizing, firstly, that coal is a strategic asset for them. They sit on over 200 billion tons of coal. And, our Honorable Minister of Mines was quoted the other day by saying that, it's important that we are subscribing to a cleaner world. But, it would be a significant sin if you leave all the abundance of this God-given resource in the ground. So I think that's the right attitude. And because of that type of attitude, doors were open to us. The financial institutions that are linked to government, state-owned institutions, development corporations, and the like, were willing to sit around the table with us. It was very difficult. Let's just understand that, because open-cast coal mining in Botswana is quite new, had to get their heads around it. But when you have people around the table that they have got the right intent and they see the bigger picture, then you can work through all the long processes and the expensive debt and so forth. And because of that partnership, I believe that's how saved our bacon. We're also in a situation where we didn't want debt, but because of where we are now in this position, and very, very grateful to the Botswana government for doing that for us.
Thank you, Morné. I mean, as tough as that story is, it's something that's very, very encouraging. And going to that point, there's a very specific reason that the Botswana government, kind of helped you around this, keeping your operations going and sort of being an effective competitor in the market. And that is because you're sneaking your toes across the border and stealing Shammy and Zandile's lunch, right? You're eating their sandwiches out of their tuck box while they're not looking. So do you just want to tell us where you sort of see that market opportunity for yourself as a Botswana coal producer? Because we've heard Zandile talking earlier on about the export market, export prices, and the opportunity. What is it that you are seeing that they may not be seeing or may not be interested in?
Yeah, I believe it's probably not being interested in. My colleagues are well versed with the coal industry, so it's choices we make. So for Minergy, it was quite clear that the business model from the start, although it had the opportunity to do power generation, supply, or follow export, although it was as a landlocked country, Botswana disqualifies itself immediately. We, as a management team, have got experience in the sized coal market, and that is the regional market, the industrial market in South Africa. And from all our history and our trading days, that's where we supply our coal into. And we believe that is a segment in the South African coal industry that is a small segment. I mean, if you read some of the statistics, the market is probably as big as between 30 and 34 million tons. That's dwarfed by what Eskom takes or what Sasol takes and so forth. So, people run towards those because they're probably the low fruit. But in terms of that market, we've got our cement industries, we've got our chemical industries, we've got steel industries. Importantly, we have breweries, hospitals and all those type of things. They need to be supported. And that's the market that we believe requires support. Now, what happens typically in the South African market is that the domestic market is the black and the old child, so the black sheep in the family. If there's an oversupply of coal, okay, wonderful. What are we going to do? Prices drop and so forth. When there's an undersupply, all the coal is pulled off the market, and the industrial market must go find coal. So they suffer from what I call a consistency of good quality of supply. They switch on and switch off because the export market and the power generation market gets all the preference. So we're comfortable to supply into that market. If people don't want to supply in there, we're very, very happy to take a portion of that market. Also, we are fortunate because we've got certain logistical advantages. We're located quite south in Botswana. We're quite close to the Northwest Province. And, we have logistical advantages delivering product into the cement industry. We even have logistical advantages on par with the Middelburg area into Cape Town. So, we look at that market. We're very privileged to handle it into that market. It needs to be supported. And that's the backbone of the infrastructure industry in South Africa. So we can't let them down. And if you look at our significant resource, the consistency of qualities, I think we're very well placed to assist them. And that's a segment that we've identified. Not that we're not interested in Eskom. We are shortlisted to supply coal into the Tuka power station. We have opportunity to support export. You know, the Mamabula-Lephalale link is very important for Botswana. And again, going back to my previous conversation, the support that government and the focus that they've got, they want to develop this. So that link is going to be built. We know it's probably 23, 24. And that will link Botswana to the RBCT corridor. And that will make Botswana coal quite competitive, because then you take, you know, the logistics cost, and we're on par with that. So very exciting times, but that's where we're focusing on the moment on the Indian market.
Thanks, Morné. So, Shammy, the man there on the screen, I think if I look at the AV desk here, just to your left on the screen, with his hand in your tuck box from over the border, where do you see the market for Ndalamo and emerging kind of producers? And a specific, kind of question that's come up in this conversation is around this transition to a low carbon economy, and a just transition to a low carbon economy. And what does that mean for a producer like Ndalamo that sort of needs to find its way? And if you could have a similar kind of a relationship with government to what Morné has with his, what is the conversation that you think needs to be had there?
Well, thank you. I'm not sure where to start on that one. I had to go and actually quite check what the definition of a low carbon economy is. And I'll tell you why. And that's just because we mine carbon. And I think by mere effect of saying just that, I think for us, the way I look at the low carbon economy and how we play on it is, well, the transition specifically. I actually think for us to survive going forward, we need to start looking at what the end users of our products are doing with our products. And that's because we mine carbon. You know, I think, not unless if I don't understand metallurgy very well, but I can't see yourself washing coal such that you have less carbon, you know. So from that transition point of view, I do believe that we need to start looking internally as in our own operations to, number one, how do we chase carbon neutrality like everybody else is? Whatever it is that we can change that minimizes the impact on carbon emissions internally first. And I actually think going forward, whether banks want to give us money or not, we need to start looking at that such that we can say to the banks, look, guys, just like in Amazon, they're not chasing zero carbon emissions, they're chasing neutrality. Neutrality does not mean you don't emit. You know, I think we need to start there. Number two, we need to then start working with the end users of our coal. You gotta know whether they have got the necessary technologies to be able to make sure that what they're not supposed to emit, they do not. How long that will take, I am not sure. But I think for us, we really need to start paying attention to what happens with our coal. And I think specifically to South Africa, it might actually jumble up with what you've asked. Eskom seems to have this problem in some of their power stations. One of my views is how do we work with the government / Eskom to see if whether junior miners or emerging miners don't find ways and means that should Eskom get tired of looking after them, we say, look, we can get them to emit less, leave it up to us, find a ways of giving us the opportunity to, because that is another way where we will be able to sustain. I think from a mining perspective as well, we need to be able to say, look, where do we start with all of this? And one of the things I think, again, at the risk of sounding like a politician who refers everything to government, which I don't like, I do believe that we need better coordination such that we know who is doing what where, such that either you can work together to make sure that it's impactful. I'll give you an example. You've got Arnott Power Station, for an example, where there might be 3 or 4 or 5 of us who supply it. And then tomorrow I might hear that the Eskom board has decided they want to shut it down. What if amongst 5 of us, we can be able to amass enough capital to be able to convert it into something greener? I do believe that that is the transition that coal miners will have to navigate and go through. Export-wise, those who play, I think that we will have to work with whoever buys the coal of us, the very same thing that we get from banks when they say, are you Equator Principle certified? At some point in future, we will have to certify what those who buy coal from us are doing with it. So as you can see, it sounds very complicated, but because it is. It has got many facets of it, both economic, environmental, financial. So it is something that I believe that either from the Minerals Council, whether it's from government, it needs better coordination because it needs investment in technology. Are we able to extract coal and mine it better such that we leave what we don't necessarily have to extract in the ground and not take it out? Do we have better technologies that are not so much intensive on some of the stuff, meaning better X-ray sorters and stuff like that, where we don't have to use as much water and electricity and all of those things. So there are many facets. And I think from a junior perspective, we will struggle to be able to come up with the might that a Mineral Council has, where you are able to fund research to be able to do all of this. We definitely want to be part of it such that we can prepare ourselves better and be able to exploit these opportunities as they come through.
Thank you, Shammy. And that was really a little bit of where the tongue-in-cheek polling question sort of came from, was to say, if we're transitioning to a low-carbon economy, what does that mean for junior producers in numbers? And what is that engagement between yourself and government around the participation, the program, the schedule, etc.? And I think that brings us back to Zandile, back to where we started this conversation. So your team has a slightly different view on the breadth of the role that an emerging producer can play in the overall energy mix. And maybe you can just share with the audience what that view is and what your specific plans are around participating in this process.
I don't necessarily think it's a view, Sandra. I think it's a reality. We finding ourselves, particularly as BRM, in a, maybe call it a better position as what Shammy was saying. After having acquired Koornfontein, obviously it comes with an allocation in Richards Bay. So we are able to play meaningfully in the export markets. And I think somebody asked Xavier earlier on that why are juniors going out of business? And Xavier's answer, he alluded to the fact that it's because the juniors are overexposed to Eskom, and that is a fact. My opinion is that they're overexposed to Eskom mainly on two reasons. One, it's because of the nature of the qualities. They are deeming themselves to be that of domestic qualities. But also secondly, there isn't enough allocation in Richards Bay for all the emerging miners so that they can export their coal through the Richards Bay coal terminal. If you look at the Richards Bay, RBCT has a theoretical capacity of about 91 million tons, and 95% of that is sitting with the shareholders. Only about 4 million tons is administered by DMR under the Quattro allocation. Now, that is not enough for the junior miners that we have to play meaningfully in the export position. So I'm saying it's not a different view, and it's a reality that we find ourselves as BRM because we have a slightly better position because we have an allocation of ours, and we do not necessarily have to now rely on the Quattro allocation. What I think the government has to do about that, I certainly think there is a conversation that needs to be had insofar as increasing that allocation for the junior miners so that they could also, we could as the emerging miners play in the export market meaningfully.
Yeah.
Shammy is mentioning also something very interesting as far as the consortiums that can, look at taking over the power plants that Eskom is looking at mouthballing. We heard earlier on from the Eskom colleagues. They spoke about the Komati, Grootvlei, and I think Hendrina as well, with Komati being the first power station that they're wanting to repurpose. I certainly think there is an exciting conversation and an opportunity for us as emerging miners to come together and look at that very closely and see what are the opportunity costs that can come with that. And certainly there's something that we could do if we put our all our minds together and see how we can best position ourselves to be playing in the generation of power as well.
Mm-hmm. Morné, I'm going to swing back to you because you and I chatted about this this notion of whether you focus on your core business of mining or whether you sort of put your toe into the power generation game. because your other coal producer in Botswana really is very much focused on that captive power game. What are your views in terms of where Minergy has decided to focus its business and to focus its energy?
Yeah, so we have to play to our strengths, as we shared in our good discussion, for us to maximize value for our shareholders, we believe that the quickest way to monetize coal in Botswana was to follow the route of sending it into the regional market in South Africa. If you look at a power station setup or waiting for an export line or rail line to be built, you've got shareholders' money. What are you sitting and doing with it? So we're quite cognizant of that, and the quickest way for us was the regional market. A power station takes a long time to develop, and the like. So we playing to our strengths, and from a strategy perspective, we will supply the coal into that market because that's where our expertise is. We have been asked to supply into Eskom in terms of the tender process, so we'll already start crossing and diversifying our markets. As I've mentioned earlier, we will play in the export market. But so those are the uses of coal that we believe that we should take advantage of. It doesn't preclude us one day from building our own power station or assisting the government to do something like that. But we have to get a stable foundation. As my colleagues will confess, it's very, very difficult to get into a stabilized environment, especially now with COVID and the like. So we take all the money that we've got very seriously. We don't have Sensia, we've got Z.B.S. We turn the Z.B.S around quite quickly and make sure that we get the most bang for our buck here. And so that's why the business model must get you onto a stable platform before you have these greater prospects that you can see. I want to say something else.
I'm laughing, Morné, because I know that you use an expression that includes the word grandeur when we were first having a chat about this. But maybe you can just also quickly use the opportunity to give the audience a sense of the advantages that you think you've got on a basis relative to South Africa that we spoke about. So what makes this open pit coal mining in Botswana something that you think is quite competitive, despite, as you have mentioned, the fact that you are landlocked?
Yeah, so you're going to laugh when I'm going to share this with you, but we were talking, I was listening to some of the participants this morning, but we've got lower input costs. We, as Botswana, get our fuel from South Africa, but we pay cheaper for our fuel. So, the conversation about the significant amount of levies built into it, it's quite ridiculous that we use South African fuel, make Botswana coal and sell it back into South Africa. So, I think that's the first point. The second point is, I think in terms of tax legislation, it's quite friendly on this side. The tax rates are lower. Government is willing to assist in terms of economic development zones and the likes, so forth. So we have those type of things. So those are the two main ones. We are fortunate to have some good geology on this side. It gives us lower strip ratios. And then, as I've mentioned to you, at the end of the day, coal is a logistics game. And if we can deliver the coal to our end market at a cheaper rate because of distance, then we're going to do that. And hence our location is significantly in our favor. The Northwest provinces is across the border, and that's why we have good offtakes into that market. So those are the ones I would think of up front.
That really kind of stand out from a competitive perspective. I could see Shammy and Zandile's eyes widen the minute you said that you get cheaper fuel on your side. And Shammy, maybe I can just sort of loop back to you, because this is something that you had mentioned in your kind of conversation, to say that as a junior producer, you guys really need to either band together, or you need to get some support from the Minerals Council for the industry sort of overall. And I was wondering if you just want to expand a little bit on some of the ideas that you shared with me, technology and opportunities that coal miners could look into if there was research support from the Minerals Council to help you guys explore new markets or new ideas or new business models.
Oh, thanks. Thanks, Morné, for rubbing it in. I think these are some of structural issues that are worth actually discussing in South Africa that affect us. Funny enough, I actually do believe that there is a lot of opportunities if there were structural changes. I mean, at the risk of sounding controversial, I mean, I'm not a believer that Eskom must be the only producer of power using coal in South Africa. You know, I think those days are gone. We've got hungrier people who are willing to go through learning and coming up with new technologies that can have low carbon impact going forward. I mean, you're not saying that because you hate Eskom in any way, shape, or form. But if you want to make use of an opportunity of a natural resource that we have bestowed upon us on the ground, you can't basically try and go and create a single market for the coal at the detriment of the greater good. I think let's set the standard for everybody such that they are the same, meaning whatever is required for Eskom to produce coal, whatever are those requirements environmentally, Zandile can be given those requirements. And if she can be able to pull in capital to do so, why not? Why does it have to be just Eskom alone who are given that opportunity to do so? So, I mean, I think the second part about it is definitely, again, I mean, are there incentives in play that get us to be able to say, look, one of the suggestions that I think I have is to say, look, how do you come up with incentive schemes for juniors that make sure that the so-called low carbon transition we were talking about? And the reason for that is we are bottom end feeders. We count every rand that we've got. We do know how to have the kind of a muscle that the Mineral Council will have to be able to go and sponsor global-wide research on some of the stuff. But if there are benefits out of it, if there are outcomes out of it that we can be able to go and implement in our operations, in our industry, we'll definitely love to have access to those. So, and that is why I honestly do believe that it must be a multifaceted approach of how we transition towards that. And I think thirdly, my own hypothesis here is such that I think in future, if we're going to do things well, we might have to find ourselves where we consolidate as an industry as well. We might have to find ways where we can work together such that we can be able to share the good out of coming out of my neighbor somewhere else, such that we can then be able to. And I think logistics is a case in point. Some have sidings, some don't, and all of that. So there has to be either consolidation forced by circumstances or, you know, basically way of cooperating such that we can all be able to lobby some of the things that Zandile was talking about as well. So look, let us all go and find where Minister Mantashe is and say, how do you get us more allocation out of Richards Bay? How do we get access to Transnet as well, such that we can get trains? So I do think that there will be more cooperation in the coal space going forward. I think we need to scream a bit louder that there is deregulation of power generation in South Africa, such that we are able to give people an opportunity to do things better.
Thank you, Shammy. I see Bernard's popped up on the screen here. I was trying to convince Shammy and Zandile before we came onto the platform that a merger proposal would be in order, Bernard, and I think Shammy's kind of started raising the flag there. So over to you in the audience.
Yeah, no, thank you. I saw you got hyper excited when mergers and acquisitions got raised. You know, this is why we get Sandra for free every time. As you know, she's here to, you know, find these opportunities to advise probably both of you. But I don't know about Shammy's business, Zandile. I think you should do a hostile takeover of his. I mean, that's my personal view, and I'm very well qualified to assist with that. I could give you some advice of how not to do that. Okay. But Zandile, sorry, let me start with the poll results. You know, this is an echo chamber. We should all leave this echo chamber. There's no money to be made on betting on who thinks that coal's going to die out within 10 years. Zero. So a good 80% of this audience thinks coal's going to be around for 30 years plus or forever. So be careful. We are amongst the wrong, you know, we're in an echo chamber, you know. Well, if everybody agrees with you, it's time you revisit some of your assumptions. So, but this is, of course, a cold day, and this is, you know, what we are talking about. But Zandile, I was very interested in Koornfontein. I looked at it very closely. I thought it was an asset worth saving, and then it got so messy that I stopped paying attention. So are you up and running? Are you at a business rescue? Are you actually producing? Are you exporting? Just give us a 2-minute update. And then I'm going to ask you a really question with a sting in the tail. So just for 2 minutes, feel comfortable, and then I'm going to follow it up with a stinger.
Okay, no, that's fine. Thanks, Bernard. And fortunately, my chairman is here, so he's going to take all the difficult questions. So officially, Koornfontein is out of business rescue, and BRM Koornfontein are the new owners of the mine as of last year. We are in the process of finalizing a CSA with Eskom, so that we can start our operations. But amongst other things that we're doing, Koornfontein has got a siding, as you rightfully know, Bernard, the Koornfontein siding. So we are in the process of revamping that siding. A lot of things were ran down. So there's exceptionally a lot of work that we still need to do to get Koornfontein up and running. So our first project that we undertook was to revamp the Koornfontein siding, which is well underway. So we are busy with that. We've got rails that are being put now as we speak, and we're anticipating that in the next 4 months or so, that siding will be up and running.
Excellent.
We're also in discussions with big players to rehabilitate our wash plants. There's about 4 wash plants that are in there. So we're talking to the likes of your Fraser Alexander, your Minopax, so that they could give us a proposal, and we could see which of the entities can we go with in terms of fixing and refurbishing the wash plants. And we are certainly, we finalized our plans in terms of opening the box cut. We will start with the open cast, which we call Luvhengo. It's no secret. And once we sign on the dotted lines with Eskom, we hitting the ground and we're opening the first ton of coal. So this year we should be breaking ground.
Okay, now I've got 2 questions with a sting in the tail. Have you left all the legacy shareholders behind? I know this was very famously part of the overall sort of Gupta shenanigans, but there were also other players there at Koornfontein specifically. Are you a clean new start business, or have you carried some of the legacy shareholders with you?
We are 100% owned by Black Royalty Minerals, which is a very clean as it can get. So we have left all the legacy shareholders and the legacy issues, if I could put it that way. So there is no one that is part of us.
Sandra will translate it. In Afrikaans we say gemors. I think it's mess, but gemors sounds so much better now. That was quite a gemors, so well done for that. And obviously it gives a suite of assets that should not have died a chance to be extended. So well done. You've got this preference to be called emerging. Now, to me, this sounds political. So you don't want to be a producer, and you don't want to be. So why do you want to be emerging? Do you get achsistoch help from others, or why can't you just be a producer? What is up with this emerging thing?
I believe this is why I was planning a hostile takeover of the coal day before Bernard dialed in.
You should have, eh? You should have, yeah. So back to the emerging as a preferred sort of term. What? It's clearly it's got a meaning to you. Why do you prefer that?
No, I believe in the power of words, Bernard, and to call smaller coal producers or smaller miners, I think it's more appetizing to say emerging. You heard how, I think it was Mike Dege earlier on who said very boldly that he does not belong into the junior miners or so-called smaller miners. And I think he subscribes to exactly the same notion as I do, that if you keep on saying smaller, the child never grows to be emerging or even bigger. So for me, it's got nothing to do with political association or whatsoever, but I just believe that emerging coal producers or emerging miners or emerging something sounds a lot more positive than smaller coal producers.
Shammy, you want to call out your colleague, or are you in agreement with her? Are you now also going to be emerging? When are you finally going to be emerging, young man?
I I think I will have to go and double check with our market consultant here, because I think sometimes, depending on which side of the fence you're sitting on, it always works best when you look like you are about to get into a certain position. We all want to be as balanced as a Siriti, for an example, or a Tungela, meaning you can tap into the local market, the export market, and you've got all the bells and whistles required to do so. So the reason why maybe the word emerging was coined is to such, look, we are all trying to achieve the same goal, where you have got a platform where you can be able to do both. So as long as either you're still short in one, you feel like you still have work to do. I mean, I remember when I got into the coal game almost 12 years ago, everywhere I went, they will be like, okay, allocation. We got in through Quattro bit by bit, but you feel like, okay, Quattro is not good enough. So rather than say you're small, you feel like yourself, look, I'm trying to reach a certain objective. So, and that is why we basically agreed on the word emerging.
So just quickly, Shammy, if you had to make your bet on either domestic or export, and I mean, you can tell me now you want to be everything, but if you had to pick in the short term, where would you think you could establish yourself and viability and sustainability? Are you confined to domestic, and is that okay? Or are you going to make your bet with export, and is there space? So which one of those two to pick, and why would you do that?
Look, our strategy is both. Our strategy is such that we won't do a single product mine, meaning we wouldn't invest in an export only mine. We will always prefer that it's dual, and the reason for that is Eskom has found a way of creating a cycle when we shouldn't have a whole cycle buying in South Africa. Honestly, they have. So in that manner, obviously, the techno-economic parameters are different. During good times, you definitely want to watch more in export, but we all know that it's a cyclical game. During bad times, you obviously want to have a cushion where the cost of washing can be subdued by just supplying the local market, and that is just a quality differentiator, So we don't have a fixed number in terms of how big, but you definitely set up your business in a manner that during good times like we are now, Transnet performing if they were, you will maximize on the export markets, but your business hopefully is still sustainable during the times when the export markets are not playing along. The pricing of it is not necessarily linked, export and what Eskom does. Yeah. Those are two different mechanisms altogether. But from a strategy point of view, we prefer to have both.
Good luck. Good luck. So Morné, so you are the neighbor next door who steals our water, you steal our diesel cheaply. I mean, and then you come and sell back the cabbage to us at discount prices. Surely that's not sustainable. But seriously, I mean, so anything around the resources, energy, supply, strategic supply to Eskom, surely there's an overlay of national interest and even nationalism in it. Are you experiencing any of that? Are you foreseeing any of that? Can you really win a request for a supply from Eskom as a neighboring supplier? Just unpack it a little bit for us in a minute or so.
Yeah, so of course we can. We're quite confident that we can supply to Eskom. But one of your speakers this morning put it very well, that we have to look at Africa as a continent, and we have to band together as the SADC region or Southern Africa and so forth. So we shouldn't start picking where is the mine is located. We have a problem with energy poverty in Africa, and they all should come together. So I'm fully for supporting an African approach. That's the bottom line from our side. So we're starting to see that in the working relationship between Transnet Freight Rail and Botswana Rail. They want to build the link between the two countries. So there is that collaboration. So, we see a lot of these partnerships accruing for the benefit of the African continent. So we shouldn't sit there. We all have to get our minds up and running and so forth. But at the end of the day, we have to look at the end goal, and that's energy poverty.
But Shammy could not get the government of Botswana. It's great once you're bailed out, but is it fair? Is it really fair? And is it sustainable?
if it's sustainable if your government supports you all the way. So, you know, in our case, I don't see our government turning around and changing the tune and putting blocks in, and that's the bottom line. That's the difference. Sorry for Shammy. I know exactly what he's going through, but that's the bottom line. And the government's come out publicly about that.
Yeah, and I mean, government should compete at the right level. No, they should not compete by preventing businesses. They should compete by enabling businesses. And there's a lot our government could do to catch up with what other governments are doing. And Botswana is a good neighbor, a good neighborly example. I mean, you know, we don't have to go to Singapore or Canada. We can actually look at Botswana to see what can be done. Guys, this was such fun. Sandra, you always make it a very entertaining and an in-depth conversation. Thank you, guys. Thank you very much for your participation. Thank you, and good luck with all of your strategies and dreams. And please emerge so that we can call you, I don't know what then. Cheers, guys.
Thanks, Bernard.
Thanks, Bernard.
Cheers.